This video was motivated by a recent exchange I had with a Muslim over his interpretation of Surah 65:4. I'll put a link to that exchange in a pinned comment so that you can read up on it if you like. But throughout this exchange with this individual, I kept wondering how other Muslims interpret Surah 65:4. I mean, the things around Muhammad and Aisha, those whole circumstances are pretty well known, but Surah 65:4 is less talked about. And so in this video, we're going to review some of the material regarding Muhammad and Aisha and the Sahih, and then we're going to move to Surah 65:4 and what some of the Tafsir say about it. And then at the end of this video, I'll have some questions that I would like Muslims to answer if they're willing to do so, because I want to see how you interpret 65:4. So we'll start with defining our terms here, and we're going to define these terms because it's at this point that Muslims like to equivocate, and the purpose of this equivocation, as it was with the individual I was having the discussion with, is to make it appear as though the girls in Surah 65:4 are not actually prepubescent. And if you sort of equivocate on the definition of prepubescent, then you can have your own custom definition that evades the criticism that Surah 65:4 is addressing prepubescent girls. However, there is an objective definition of prepubescent, and it comes right from Sahih al-Bukhari. So when we look at Bukhari 352, chapter 18, we see that the attaining of puberty and start of menses are used synonymously. Now, if you know how Bukhari works on sunnah.com, you'll see that there are chapters, and at the beginning of these chapters will be introductions in Arabic, and they're often not translated to English. However, in my hard copy, they are translated, and so I have an image to show you what that translation looks like. Once again, this is volume 3, book 52. The attaining of puberty by women is with the start of menses. Okay, so there's your definition right from Sahih al-Bukhari, which is the context that we're going to look at for several hadith here. Now, you'll notice that I have links next to each hadith, and this is for easy reference for you and to make the video flow faster. So I'm not going to stop and cite the source for each one of these, but I'm going to copy paste all of this information into a pinned comment so you can very easily check these sources for yourself. All right, regarding Muhammad and Aisha, of course, he married her when she was 6 years old, and he consummated his marriage when she was 9 years old. This is documented in numerous hadith that are rated Sahih. From Sahih Muslim 1422c, she was taken to his house as a bride when she was 9 and her dolls were with her. Now this is significant because according to Bukhari 6130, which also quotes the commentary on Bukhari, it was allowed for Aisha at the time, that is playing with dolls, as she was a little girl, not yet reached the age of puberty. So in addition to her being described as a little girl at the age of 9 who came from a swing set, incidentally, according to other hadith, she had her dolls with her, and this was allowed because she was prepubescent, and that's when she went to Muhammad's house for intercourse. Now this brings us to Dawood 4931, because sometimes Muhammad would stay there with Aisha and her friends as they would play with dolls, and sometimes something else would happen. This is rather disturbing. I used to play with dolls. Sometimes the Messenger of Allah entered upon me when the girls were with me. When he came in, they went out. And when he went out, they came in. So sometimes when Muhammad would approach Aisha and her friends with dolls, they would all leave, and then it would just be her and Muhammad alone. And when Muhammad would leave, then her friends would come back. This is really disturbing stuff. And we have a couple of parallel narrations here in Bukhari. These narrations describe Aisha as a little girl who has not yet reached puberty, and she's being screened while she's at this festival watching some Ethiopians. And that's Bukhari 5236 and 5190. Now, I have a note at the end of 5190, right after Aisha says, "You may estimate of what age a little girl may listen to amusement." And again, she's described in 5236 as not yet reaching the age of puberty. And in Dr. Muhammad Khan's translation, he has a footnote right at the bottom of 5190 in Bukhari, and I'll put that up on the screen, that says, "Aisha was 15 years old then." And once again, because Muslims love to avoid this stuff, I'll put it on the screen for you. Now, Aisha is further described numerous times in the hadith as being a young girl of immature age. There's another example there from Bukhari, and a link if you want to check that out. Now, let's move into Surah 65:4, because what Surah 65:4 says, if you are in doubt about those of your women who have despaired of menstruation, you should know that their waiting period is 3 months, and the same applies to those who have not menstruated as yet. So what this is describing is there's a waiting period prior to divorce, and this is to prevent a woman from getting pregnant and not knowing who the father is. Basically, if she gets divorced and she's pregnant, but it's in the early stages of pregnancy, nobody knows it, she gets remarried again, has intercourse, consummates the marriage, and then she's pregnant, well, who's the father? And so there's a waiting period prior to divorce that's enforced to prevent this issue. Surah 33:49 says, "O believers, if you marry believing women and divorce them before the marriage is consummated, you are not required to observe the waiting period." So the waiting period is only if the marriage is consummated. Obviously, if it was not consummated, then the woman's not going to be pregnant, so you don't need to observe the waiting period. Now, according to Kathir's Tafsir, this is a command on which the scholars are agreed that if a woman is divorced before the marriage is consummated, she does not have to observe the waiting period. So why is all this significant? Well, it's significant because Surah 65:4 prescribes a waiting period for girls who have not menstruated. Why is a waiting period required? It's required because the marriage was consummated, which means that you can consummate a marriage with a pre-pubescent girl according to Surah 65:4. Now, Maududi triumphantly proclaims this. Therefore, making mention of the waiting period for the girls who have not yet menstruated clearly proves that it is not only permissible to give away the girl in marriage at this age, and what is that age? Well, it's the age of prepubescence, the age before menstruation. But it is also permissible for the husband to consummate the marriage with her. Now, Maududi anticipates the shock of his audience as he quickly adds, now, obviously, no Muslim has the right to forbid a thing which the Quran has held as permissible. And so Maududi lets the Quran interpret itself. A waiting period is required for girls who have not yet had their periods. A waiting period is required because a marriage is consummated. Therefore, you are allowed to consummate your marriage with a girl who has not yet reached puberty. This is the background of Surah 65:4 according to numerous tafsir. Let's look at a couple. From Jalalain, those who have not yet menstruated because of their young age. Again, those who are too young. And again, what about the waiting period of those who do not have menstruation because they are too young? And again, from Kathir, who have not reached the years of menstruation. Let's go back into the modern era with Sayyid Qutb. In this surah, the waiting period of a divorced woman or who is too young to have a period is specified. So you see this common thread, too young, too young, too young, too young to have a period, and there is a waiting period prescribed to them because you're allowed to consummate the marriage with these girls who have not yet reached the age of puberty. So with this in mind, I have a couple of questions for Muslims. Do you affirm or deny that a waiting period is required for divorce only if the marriage has been consummated in accordance with Surah 33:49? Do you accept or reject the numerous tafsir cited in this video which explicitly state that Surah 65:4 was revealed in part to address waiting periods for girls too young to menstruate? Moving from the tafsir to the Quran, do you affirm or deny that a waiting period is required in the Quran for girls too young to menstruate? Do you acknowledge the Quran makes provision for marriage, consummation, and divorce of prepubescent girls? If your own interpretation differs from what you've seen in this video, what is your textual basis for it? So Muslims, I'd like to see your answers to these questions. I'll be watching the comment section to see what you have to say. Thanks for watching.